I go to Disneyland a lot. I didn't go until I was in my 30s. When I was a kid, I lived in Florida. We'd go to the Magic Kingdom once or twice a year. And I grew up thinking, hey, I'm going to the Magic Kingdom all the time. Why would I ever want to go to an older, smaller park like Disneyland? When you're a kid, you think the Magic Kingdom is the best there is because it's the biggest, the newest, the hottest. So when I finally went to Disneyland for the first time about 7 years ago, I was blown away by how much I loved it. It's so small and charming, really adorable. Feels like this little play box that you can hang out in. But more importantly, it has so much more to do than the Magic Kingdom. Despite being a lot smaller, they pack so many attractions in there, including a number that you won't find in Orlando, including ones that are much better than the versions you will find in Orlando. I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of those right now. These are my picks for the 10 best attractions at Disneyland in Anaheim, California. Let's go ahead and start with number 10. This is one of the classic Fantasyland dark rides. It's a Peter Pan's Flight. This is probably the most popular ride in Fantasyland. There's always a very long line if you aren't able to get there early or aren't able to get a fast pass for it. And there's a good reason for it. The ride system where you're riding in the flying ship, it's unique for Fantasyland, where a lot of the rides have similar feels to them. And with that view you get of London beneath you as you soar above it, the lights of Big Ben and the lights of all the homes down below you in London. It's a gorgeous tableau that you can see in that moment. They've added some recent upgrades to it the last few years to make it a little bit more hi-fi and technologically advanced than it used to be. It doesn't ruin the classic appeal or spirit of the original ride. It's definitely worth seeking out. Number 9 is the Matterhorn, which turns 60 this year. It's the first roller coaster at Disneyland. You can kind of feel it when you ride it because it's going to hurt them bones of yours. You're going to get rattled around real bad. But it's also a really fun, breezy little coast down this mountain with the Yeti basically chasing you along the way. Also, I love the music you hear in the line, that like Swiss bobsled, alpine yodeling music. It's a lot of fun. Number 8 is, it's 24 years old, but it's still one of the newer rides at Disneyland. It's the Indiana Jones Adventure Temple of the Forbidden Eye, which in America, this is the only place you can ride this attraction. They don't have this in Orlando. This is a really in-depth recreation of an Indiana Jones style adventure. You get on this Jeep with 7 other riders and you go over through this rickety, crazy adventure through an old temple. All sorts of hazards threaten you along the way. Indiana Jones pops up a couple times to save you. An audio animatronic, obviously not Harrison Ford. He has not been living in Disneyland for the last 24 years. And this is a really fun one. Number 7, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. This is a classic Disney ride. You can pretty much ride at every single castle park around the world. The Disneyland version is one of the best. They did some upgrades a few years ago that set it apart from the Orlando version. It still has the classic story you expect of a runaway mine train going through this old mountain, this old abandoned mine in a small western town. It still has the dynamite goat on the top of one of the peaks, which is probably my favorite personal part. And again, it's, unless you're Billy Corgan, who seemed to have a really bad time on it that time he wrote it, it's just a really fun, light roller coaster that's perfect for children just starting out their roller coaster adventures. Number 6, I feel like this might be a controversial one. It gets a bad rep. I don't know why. It's a Small World. I love this thing. I don't care what anyone thinks about that. Yeah, the song might get annoying, but if you listen to it closely as you're going through the ride, as you hear the same musical motif, the same melody translated into all these different musical idioms, different instrumentations, different styles. It's almost like a kind of, I don't know, like postmodern, modern composition or something. Like it's almost like a weird Disney version of, I don't know, like Steve Reich or Philip Glass or something. And it's also a beautiful vision of what humanity could be if we all got together and stopped hating each other. Slightly racist, and that's bad. But number 5, Space Mountain. This would be higher. The original Space Mountain, or the normal Space Mountain, where you have the space projections and you have that amazing score pumping through the speakers behind your head, is probably my personal favorite experience at Disneyland. They have a lot of overlays for it, or at least 2 overlays, one of which, Hyperspace Mountain, has been running constantly for the last year or so. This is the Star Wars overlay where you see TIE fighters and you hear the John Williams music, and I can understand how that's thrilling for big Star Wars fans, but especially now that Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is open, I don't understand why they keep it in Space Mountain. Basically, there's a classic Disney gym there that is right now it's completely covered up with something else that slightly ruins the experience for me. Number 4, this was my favorite ride as a kid in Orlando, and then they ripped it out in 1998. I'm talking about Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. It is very short. It is very ridiculous. It's the only ride where you die and go to hell in the end. It is the perfect ride to get on after number 1, which I'll get to in a few minutes, because that last room is so hot and warm, it'll dry you off pretty quickly. It's a really fun sort of a cross between a classic dark ride like the other Fantasyland rides and something slightly more thrilling with the knee-jerk turns, almost like a Wild Mouse coaster. And of all the opening day attractions that are left, it is easily my favorite. Number 3, celebrating its 50th anniversary right now, Haunted Mansion, the original Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. It's an absolute Disney classic, one of the greatest theme park rides ever made, full of so many unforgettable moments and hilarious little gags and everything. The only reason this is at number 3 is because, once again, there's an overlay that they put on this ride for 4 to 5 months a year. It's the Nightmare Before Christmas haunted holiday mansion, which is also, totally fine. If you like Nightmare Before Christmas, it's fun to see the characters from the movie. They still pay a lot of respect to the original ride. But if you're only going to go to Disneyland once in your life, it better not be between September and January, so that you can actually experience the original ride in all its glory. Number 2, Pirates of the Caribbean. This is, like Haunted Mansion, one of the classic dark rides in the entire theme park industry. It's a long, sprawling adventure into the past, through Dead Man's Cove, I think they call it, where you see the skeletons of pirates left over from the old days, and then you finally actually go back into the past to see a Caribbean port town being taken over by pirates. The one in Anaheim is a much better ride than the one I grew up experiencing in Orlando. It's significantly longer. That opening portion with the skeletons is 3 times as long, maybe. It has 2 drops instead of 1. The opening of it, when you're going through the dark swamps of Louisiana with the Blue Bayou restaurant right next to you, looking like you're outdoors at night, even when you're indoors in the daytime. It's just a beautiful way to set the table for the rest of the ride. This is, of all the classic Disney rides, the ones that have been around for 50 years or more, the best. Number 1, a more recent ride. It's still old. I realize to me it's new because it opened in the 80s, and to most people probably who are listening to this, that's probably not that old. I mean, it's probably very old, I should say. If you're a kid today, obviously you grew up with this. It's called Splash Mountain. It is canonically the only ride at Disneyland that takes place in our home state of Georgia. This is the ride based on the animated versions of the Uncle Remus stories that Disney made. And it's a long, very long, dark ride that ends with this massive 50-foot drop. The version in Anaheim will get you much wetter for some reason than the one in Orlando. I don't know why that is. I rode it last week and got completely soaked, way more than I expected. But if you like audio animatronics, you like storytelling on dark rides, there's so much going on in this ride. And that portion at the end, after you go through the drop, when you're found the laughing place and you see the riverboat with all the animals singing on it and all the alligators playing the banjos and the raccoon playing the harmonica, it's just one of the most joyous moments you'll experience on a ride at Disney. And before that, when you're going up the drop hill, before the drop, when you see the rabbit mother and the porcupine mother singing the song, the super sad, sorrowful song about, don't go to the laughing place or whatever, it's a ride of uncommon emotion. Like, it actually will hit you in a few different ways, and it'll get you super wet at the end. So that's my pick for number 1, Splash Mountain. And These are all at Disneyland and Anaheim. You can ride them at some other parks. They're not going to be exactly the same. There's so much more to do at Disneyland as well that could have made this list, but did not. My name's Garrett. Thanks again for watching. This is Paste Magazine, and have a very magical day. It's probably what they'd say if you were at Disneyland. I don't know.